2 weeks ago, where we covered admissions at K-12 schools, and now we're back today talking very, very specifically about the problem of automating, or at least attempting to automate, the employment of teachers and staff within K-12 schools. We've got Stephen Buckland today with us. We're wonderful. Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining. Stephen is principal at Network International School in Myanmar, a place that I tried to get to and failed only a few months ago. Stephen very kindly invited me to go and look around, and I managed to mess up my visa. Stephen knows all about visas, so he'll be talking a bit about that. We've also got Oliver Boot, who is CTO at Zegal. He'll be talking us through a little bit about how the Zegal platform works and how he works with schools. And Shriyanka will be talking about her experience at East Asia Institute of Management, amongst others, and how they've also been looking at automation. So thanks everyone for joining. So we'll crack right on. We shouldn't be very long today. I don't think this will be more than 25 or so minutes at the outside. Nice and punchy. We'll get through, and hopefully we'll all learn something in the process. So what we'll cover today, the basics, I guess, of why contract renewals is even a problem for schools. It's an important one. Kind of what it costs when we don't deal with it. You know, what schools actually might be going through today. We'll talk to school leaders. Well, the school leader we'll talk to is Stephen. So he'll tell us everything about what he knows about the problem, a little bit about the school as well. Then Ollie will take us through kindly a demo, so kind of what it looks like to actually try and solve this problem. We'll look at also how another school, a university in Singapore, the East Asia Institute of Management, has also solved that problem. And then we'll open it up to anybody who's got any questions. Also, please feel free to ask questions along the way. You can chat. There's quite a lot of people on the call today. There's sort of 16 of you, so you are on mute, but you can chat away, and I'll put the questions to people who are brighter than me who can answer them. Good. So first of all, I guess it's a bit of background. Most of you will all know, but to avoid to state the obvious, a lot of staff in schools tend to be employed on shorter term contracts than is the norm across other businesses. So it's quite common to see teachers, and especially expatriate staff, employed on 1 or 2 year contracts, and it can be even shorter term than that in some parts of the world. And of course that then puts a massive responsibility on the school to make sure that they're compliant and that the teachers have those contracts, because failure to do that means they're not going to get visas, and it might even be a case of not being able to work. So it's quite an unusual but very specific use case that education establishments face. I think if we just jump into kind of why it causes the pressure, Stephen, what is the pressure that you've had, and what's the experience in Network been?
Yeah, I mean, for us, working in the context of Myanmar, the contract scenario is doubly complicated. We have 3 documents that go to form our contracts, which all have to be signed. They contain different currencies, different values, different roles, different positions, and managing that paperwork is really challenging. The timing around it is often quite tight, and particularly as recruitment season has been tending to move a little bit earlier, we need to be able to move pretty quickly with the contracts going out. We need to move quickly with the renewals. We need to be quick in terms of getting signatures and information back from our staff, and that just puts a pretty big strain on the HR department and leadership. And if we send out information that's wrong, it's damaging to the school's reputation. So it's not something we want to do. And even in terms of getting the information back, if you don't have something that's kind of centralized and manageable, you get it back in different formats. And you might miss a piece of information, one might not be signed in the right way, and it just adds extra complexity to a process that is absolutely essential.
So who was doing that at the school then, and what was the kind of process before?
Yeah, so it was a combination of me, the director of business and administration, and then HR, and it depends on the where we are in a particular bit of the process as to who does what. So, for example, all the interviews come through me, then the offer letters go out through me, but then it gets handed over to the Director of Business and Administration for the contract side of it. And then once the contracts are signed, it goes to HR, to the management of it. And of course, in each step, there's potential for it to go wrong, or something to be missed, or the time scales to get kind of messed up. I think, you know, probably the biggest challenge for us was getting the right information back from new staff in that process. So, for example, if we couldn't start any of our visa applications until we had the passport information and the home addresses. And when you're dealing with new staff, they get very, very excited to sign the initial, yes, you've got the job letter, but then it becomes a little bit of a waiting game to get the right information back from them. So that is particularly challenging. And then with existing staff, once you've gone through the renewal process and you know you've confirmed that they do have a job, they don't want to be waiting around for a contract. And actually, the longer you allow them to wait, the more they become interested in other jobs that are out there. So there's a pressure from just external interest on your good staff anyway. So that those are particularly challenging timescales. And then I guess if you're having to edit documents manually, add updates, you know, we've got 250 employees. So we review the pay scales annually. People get different roles and responsibilities within that. So just the manual process of getting the right small piece of information, but it's a vital piece of information into the contract, into the right person. It's really important.
Thanks. I mean, that brings us on pretty neatly to the next slide, which Shrianka, I wanted to talk to you about. That, you know, Stephen's described a whole bunch of bottlenecks there. It doesn't sound like there's any one massively complicated thing going on. I think it's fair to say, right, that these are things which extend, they each have their own life, even though they might not be very complex. It's, you know, you're talking about getting a small bit of information, which in an ideal world would happen in 2 seconds, but then takes, you know, a number of weeks, and so it creates bottlenecks. What sort of problems have you seen then, Shrianka, in other schools when they're actually relying on very manual processes?
Yeah, so I mean, Stephen has already summarized all the bottlenecks, but to pinpoint, one of the biggest headaches in HR contracts, especially when it's time for renewals, it's the version control, right? It sounds very simple. There are different versions and you use the latest one, but this is where things really start to unravel if you think about it. Let's say you've got one version saved on someone's desktop, you've got one version buried in email thread with partial edits, and maybe another version printed and with handwritten notes, like some people prefer to make notes in a printed copy, right? So because these multiple versions exist, no one in the team is 100% sure which one is the final one, and that confusion slows everything down, and it really opens the team, the company, to serious risk if the wrong version sends up. Once the version control is set, the next headache start, which is the follow-up game. You send out a contract and you just wait, right? So the contract has been sent, you're waiting for the other party to sign, and you're just chasing and chasing and chasing for them to like sign the contract, and you're just sending the follow-up emails like, hey, just checking in if you had any chance to review the contract, or hey, just following up, and etc. etc. All that chasing is really time consuming already, and this is what keeps the HR team from focusing on what really matters, like let's say making sure new teachers feel welcome or they feel ready to start. So all the focus of the team goes to chasing and managing the version. So that's how the HR burnout starts. As I was speaking, I had another bottlenecks in my mind, which is the manual edits, right? As Stephen mentioned, you review payroll payment every year. Every year you review all these. So it's very common. It's a very common practice to copy last year's contract and tweak it. Like it actually makes sense because you're just making few changes here and there. It makes sense in theory, but when in practice, this is where mistakes start to happen. So to talk about the experience, the feedback that has been shared by the clients with me, we have seen contracts go out with last year's salary. We have seen contracts go out with outdated clauses that shouldn't have been there, that should have been removed. So these are all experiences of our clients, and these aren't just small mistakes. They create real problems like, let's say, pay disputes. Like you have agreed to something and you are again sent a contract with last year's salary. That creates pay disputes. It creates staff confusion, and also in general it creates legal exposure for the company as a whole. And if you think about it, what's really tough here is this is not happening because HR teams aren't doing their job. They're working day and night. They're reviewing. They're chasing details. It actually happens because the process itself is very manual and easy for things to fall through the cracks. So it starts to burn out the HR, and when you're spending all your time double checking details, sending out reminders, sending out chaser emails, there's actually no time and no space left for strategic work, like, let's say, recruitment planning, staff engagement, or even staff retention. So summarize, when we talk about bottlenecks, these aren't just about slowing things down, but they are about creating risk, stress, and real team burnout. And that's how the bottlenecks are in the HR flow.
Gosh, well, I sound quite. I feel exhausted just listening to that. It doesn't sound like a great
Yeah.
picture. What does school need is lead, Stephen? Cheer us up.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'd actually thought of another one, but I won't go there. I think
Too many negatives, but talk about some positives.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the probably the simplest thing is that accuracy. You know, I just want to know that the right version's gone out, with the right clauses in the right time, so that there's a sense of peace with it. You know, I think we've just heard possibly the worst kind of scenario nightmare of what's going on, but you know, speed really does matter in getting contracts out and getting them back. You know, we do have to race against the recruitment cycle. We have to we have to race against the calendar in terms of getting visa applications in. You know, we want to know that our onboarding process can begin in a timely and effective way so that our staff feel supported. You know, there's nothing worse than recruiting someone and then going silent. And you know, that doesn't give them a sense of well-being and peace. So there is an urgency around getting that information. And again, the standardization thing is just so important. I think, you know, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, I don't think, is when you have to insert clauses into a contract. You know, legislation changes, and particularly when you're in an environment where, let's say, the laws are flexible, you know, it is important to make sure that's right. You know, some of the legislation here recently changed, so I had to make sure that my contracts were legal, because there would be nothing more embarrassing for the school's reputation or me personally, or you know, any member of my staff, to be legally non-compliant. That wouldn't be a good thing.
And I think you were saying to me the other day as well that you're in a very unique position that actually, I mean, and it's very specific to Myanmar, of course, but you're actually doing this even more than once a year right now. You're actually doing it several times a year. You're going to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of the situation we're in, our recruitment cycle is the whole year. That's the reality of it. So that there's not one particular time where we're focused on it. It does last a long time for us. You know, we start our recruitment in probably the earliest is late November, and we're still recruiting at the moment. So it's a process for us that is particularly challenging. And I guess the other side of it is, you know, when you're in a school, it's quite a complex business. There are lots of different roles, lots of different responsibilities, and you know, a wide variety of functions for the business. So having the flexibility around your contracts to get all of the specifics that relate to those things is vital for us. And then I guess the last thing is just having this one sense of the right document is just so important. You know, there've been nothing worse than if you have to pursue a line using contracts and you don't have the right version in front of you, or you don't have a signed version. And you know, when you're sending out 3 documents to 250 people, there's so much room for error. In terms of getting the right document back with the signature. It can easily be missed.
Yeah, it's easy to miss one document in 700, isn't it? Which I think is what you're talking about. You're talking about doing 700. Yeah. So to Sriyanka's rather depressing, but very true points.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump to a slide that I like, because this is a happy slide. Obviously, you are a Zegal user. You know, so I think it's fair to say. What has Zegal done, and then why does it make sense, and why has it made your life so much easier that we get?
Well, just for all of the reasons above. I mean, as I said, we're a growing school. I mean, we started with 30 years ago with 6 children. We've now got just around 250 staff. And the contract scenario here is particularly complicated. 3 documents for 1 contract that all require signing, that are all legally binding. And just the process of managing that was so painful. You know, from the point of view of getting the right information in, to the supposedly simple process of renewals, it's gone from being several months to 3 days.
Wow.
And more than that, I have absolute confidence that I've got the right version signed and stored in the right location. I know that I can call up any one of those documents, and I know that the signature is going to be there. So that has been just a life-changing decision that we made. I guess the other side of it is knowing that actually we can scale. You know, I don't have to worry about recruitment. The process is exactly the same. I don't have to worry about capturing the information. And a real life example of this is I sent out the offer letter to someone on Monday. I got to send the contracts on Tuesday, and I got all of the information I needed back on Wednesday.
Oh, just this week?
Just this week.
Oh, wow. Okay. That wasn't scripted, guys.
No, but that would have been, I can tell you now, that would have been a minimum of a month.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, well, as I said, like, you know, it really has saved a lot of time. And the confidence it gives me going into the end of the year, my summer holidays coming up, where everyone needs their summer holiday.
Yeah.
But the confidence it's given me to kind of sit back knowing that the right things have happened in recruitment and contractually. Now all I need to worry about is them catching a plane.
Yeah, and getting a visa.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to you, Ollie. You've been very quiet for the first part, but Stephen's obviously painted a picture of what can be achieved. But Ollie, hopefully you can show us a little bit kind of behind the scenes what it actually looks like, right? Because it's all very well and good us shouting and saying that these things are easy and it all goes well. So Ollie's going to take you through now a little look at how more or less the Network International School has done this, I think.
Yeah, and so I'll show around the application a bit and how it helps. But you know, as a quick intro, a lot of organizations have gone digital, but a lot of what they're doing are still the same tasks. And so instead of photocopying a form, they'll be copy and pasting a Word document. Instead of printing and mailing something, they're attaching and emailing. And some companies are still kind of working on that first step. But all of this, although it's a digital process, it's still quite error prone. And there's a number of requirements. There might be legal requirements, contractual obligations, compliance requirements, terms and policies, or there might be operational requirements around record keeping and visa renewals, as we've been discussing. And so there's a lot of elements where having a process which is actually digital and established can make a really big difference here. And so I'll go a little run through. And so here I'm just logged into the main application. We can have a number of different templates and workflows and processes that have all been kind of set up. And so we also work with student contracts with some schools. We can also do a number of different policies, and then we can also do sort of hiring contracts. And any document, any process can be automated. There's the document itself, and there's the actual what we call the workflow, the process that might go with it, around which department it needs to go to, who needs to kind of approve it, things like that. The way that it works fundamentally is that there is a template element to it. We do tend to refer to these as kind of smart templates, because although some of the sections are just going to be filling in details, other sections, other criteria for this document are going to be inserting entire clauses, removing certain clauses, swapping clauses out, adding additional documents, pages, addendums. And so although we call it a template, it's actually sort of a master template that can apply to many different variations of a particular type of document. And so we group them by type of document, but you can have versions with different benefits that are being attached, different additional documents that are going to be part of it. And they are connected to a questionnaire. It's going to be a set of criteria, information that's relevant to this particular document. And so it can be as complex or as simple as needed. And so here we have an example which has an awful lot of different sections and categories. I have another one around the corner here, which is much, much simpler. Again, it really kind of depends on the particular type of document that you're trying to automate, how much information is relevant to it or not. The questionnaire steps are beneficial from 2 points of view. So one is it can control the actual output of the document that you're going to be creating, and so this can be standardized and set up at sort of head office level. It's also guiding the users on different options that might be available, and so various other questions are going to come out and be relevant depending on what's being selected, and it means that we can have rules around how the different parts of the document are going to come together, ensuring that the final document is correct for what we're trying to build and assemble. All of the choices that are being made are going to be part of generating an actual preview for that document. And so the document gets assembled live and can then go out for signing. At the same time, on the side, we'll have what we refer to as the workflow. And so we can have a number of different steps that are predefined. And so a default one might just be to create a contract, have an option to edit it or send it out. But common ones that we'll see here are going to be things like approval steps, where it needs to get sent off to a head of department for an approval first. We might also push information to other systems, and so school management systems, CRMs, things like this. And obviously we'll go out for signing at some point. Storage, so storing it back into something like a Google Drive or a SharePoint automatically. And again, all of these are steps which are often already part of a process, but are being done manually, one-off, and sort of falling, it's falling through the cracks occasionally. Now, I've just shown what it looks like if we want to create one at a time. What we tend to find is that some processes, one at a time is fine if you're hiring one person as you're going on, but if you have a renewal type focus where you're coming up to a new year and you've got to do 200 in one go, we can also prepare all the information ahead of time and create them all in one go. And so I'll switch over to a spreadsheet here, something that we're all generally quite familiar with. This example is actually for student contracts, but the principle is the same. And so all of the criteria that we want to assemble a particular contract can be set up as various columns, and then each of the rows will end up being a separate contract. Now, we can pull information into these sheets if there is some sort of database that has an API. And so we can pull lists of students, of employees, of deals. It really kind of depends. These are all different terms for very similar things. And we can merge it with information from other sources. So we can assemble all the information that is likely to be part of that contract. And once we're ready to send them out, we can choose to, in bulk, create and send out all the contracts with that whole workflow, everything predefined, using this year's template, using all the rules that have been defined that are part of this in one go. And so this was part of what Stephen was hinting at before. I can select 1, 100, or 1,000, and I can go and click on Generate Contracts, and that's going to send it off to our system for that process to then take part. Over on the system side, essentially what it's going to be doing is it's filling in all of the details relevant to a particular contract, and then it's going to generate it, send it out for signing, and head over to these employees, prospective employees, students, parents, whatever is the process in question. From the point of view of the recipient, it's a very traditional kind of e-signing. They receive an invitation to sign. I'll open this one up in another window so we can have a quick look. They receive an invitation to sign the email. They can browse through it. Now, what gets really interesting here is we can make use of this phase. Not only are you going to be asking them to sign a document, which might be part of that process that you have, but we can also collect information from them. And so here, I'm still on our student bundle little example. When we're sending these example documents out to parents, we also want them to confirm some information. So we can communicate additional information that's not related directly to the document as part of this process. We can also configure a number of fields that we might want employees, parents, agents, consultants, service providers, also procurement settles, any details that we might not have. And so these might be personal details, these might be passport numbers, these might be contact information, the address if they've just arrived. And so we can collect this information at the point of signing. They can then proceed to the actual signing of that document, and it all gets returned back to everyone so that it can be automatically filed. Switching back over to, not this one, over to the app. At any point in time, we can always log in and get a view of the recent documents that we've been looking at or working on. What's more interesting is we can also have a look at the documents by type of document. So I said that we're grouping our templates by general type of document. And so what this allows us to do is not only look at a static list of documents, but also view all of the metadata that was part of that particular document. And so if I can scroll over, oh, sorry, that was a bit fast. All of the details that went into creating that document, here, that's what I'm looking for. All of the details that went into creating that document are embedded, are available as metadata as part of it. And what this allows us to do is at any time have a full view of all of the contracts that have gone out. What state are they in? Are they still in signing? Have they been signed? What are the details that people have filled in? The information here is available to consume either in the web app, or it can also be exported and loaded into other say reporting elements. And so if you have any sort of BI, business intelligence tooling, you're more than welcome to use that, and we can connect it as a data source so that it automatically synchronizes. A simpler form of doing that is also to use, again, something like a spreadsheet. And so we have a connector that we can connect to either Google Sheets or Office 365, which allows pulling in that same table of data, again, a live view of all of these different contracts. And so this allows us to do any sort of pivot tables and reports that we might want to do on all the contracts that are out. And so if these are student contracts, we'll be looking at what grade are the different contracts that have gone out to the parents, which ones are signed, which ones do we need to chase. If these are more HR related contracts, then we'll be looking more at, what sort of contracts have been going out, how many of them are still pending, how many have been signed, which ones have been sent out to various employees, have they signed them, have they not? And so these are all the kind of things that we can start to do by having that data available. And again, we make the data available to you. You can customize these and set them up however you want, but it does make it a lot easier to really have a view, an at-a-glance view at what would normally be a pile of documents in a drawer somewhere. And so here you can actually get some insights into what you have and what the status is. So yeah, I think that's sort of a nice little at-a-glance view at various things that we can do.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Ollie. I really appreciate that. We are fast running out of time, actually. I know we've got a few more slides, but I wanted to make sure that we try and keep things tight. Our apologies. The call has not been set up correctly, probably my fault, to allow you to chat in the actual normal chat, but there is a Q&A function within your settings. So if you're a viewer and you want to raise a question, you'll see that there's a Q&A button down the right-hand side under meeting tools. You can ask questions there. Please post a question. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide quickly. Not too much time now, I'm afraid, Shriyanka, but if you can just go very quickly, take us through how the automation has been taken over at EAM, which is a tertiary education provider. So it's not a K-12, it's a university in Singapore. Maybe just quickly take us through that.
Yeah, sure. So at EAM, the team was actually handling agent agreements very manually. They had their custom system in place for managing details like agent and consultancy details, but having a system software but manually doing the agreement meant a lot of duplicate data entry, errors, and delays in agreement finalizing. So on top of that, they were using wet signatures, because of which they were constant back and forth. So to solve this, we worked with them to integrate automation directly into their system, their existing software. So there was no extra system, there was no extra learning curve, and there was no extra headache. So contracts were generated automatically using the data that they already had in their system, and then routed for internal reviews, and then digitally signed by both parties. And because real-time webhook triggers was also involved in EAM use case, once a contract was signed, the main system updated instantly, which helps to create a single source of truth. So as a result, agreements that used to take days now get signed in hours, like Stephen also mentioned, what used to take months happen solved in 3 days for EAM. It went from days to hours, so that's great. And errors were down, compliance were up, and the team can now focus on building strong partnership instead of chasing paperwork or worrying about version control. So EAM is a great example of how integrating automation within your existing system turns fragmented manual processes into smooth and unified workflows. So that's the EAM example.
Oof, that was done very fast. Thank you thank you for keeping that on schedule.
Yeah.
As people who know me know, I hate to overrun. I don't think we're going to have a very successful Q&A session on the next slide, unfortunately, because unfortunately, like I say, we're having a few technical problems. So if you are trying to ask questions, please just email them over after the fact, and we'll push them to Stephen if they're for Stephen, and otherwise we'll try our best to answer them. Stephen, do you have any closing comments for us on the basis that you haven't got a question to prompt you? Anything else you'd like to comment?
No, I mean, I would say that that as a project, this has been a resounding success for us, and the impact has been significant. So much so that we're now looking to do our student contracts through the system. So, you know, for us, it was the money spent has saved so much pain for us. You know, I now have 100% confidence that I've got the right information at the right time. So that's all I can say. I can't sing enough praises. I'm not being paid for this, by the way.
Exactly.
But I genuinely can't, because it was such a point of pain all the way through for us. That, you know, having a process that can now effectively take 3 days as opposed to 3 or 4 months is wonderful. So it really has changed the way that we operate. So that is fantastic.
When I first met you, Stephen, you had no hair, but no.
It's remarkable, stress-free. Yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Stephen. We obviously really appreciate the glowing feedback. Anybody else on the call who'd like to have a quick look at how things are set up for yourselves? Scan the QR code. We'll share these slides around anyway afterwards, so you've got that. But basically, this QR code takes you through to a little checklist that you can look at yourselves in your own time to figure out kind of how you're doing things now, maybe things that might not be wonderful. If you want to get any of our team to have a look at that as well, then we're very happy just to get on a call and have a look. You know, to Shriyanka's point before, and I think also, Ollie, you know, there are lots of initiatives which are kind of semi-digital. You know, you might have quite a lot of the process which is digital, but then suddenly you're signing them offline, and that's where the bottleneck exists. It might be that you've got none of it online at all, or it might be that all of it is, but for some reason it still doesn't quite work. You know, we've seen it all, I think it's fair to say, and I think the one thing that we see across many schools is, you know, a lot of effort to go digital, but then maybe still challenges where different departments have bought different solutions over time, and they don't play well together. And it's not because of a lack of effort; it's simply because of a lack of those softwares to kind of work the way that the people who bought them thought they would. So thank you very much, Stephen, for all the time today, and thank you very much for taking us through what you've done. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks, Shriyanka, for taking us through the schools. My apologies again to people on the call who might have had questions and who've just been muted the entire way through. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening to us all the same. We look forward to your feedback, and please send over any questions you've got. We finish on time, which is what I like, with 2 minutes to spare. Many thanks again, and we'll stop recording now.
Okay. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys. Thanks indeed. Thanks hugely.